My name is Chris Knight. I'm a developer evangelist with the XeroAPI team. This series is all about exploring the stories of the unique businesses that make up our app partner ecosystem. And today we're joined by co-founders Joe Gallard and Stuart Kemp from Reducer. And Reducer is an app that uses data from invoices in your accounting system to automatically find cheaper quotes on your business essentials. So really excited to have you guys here. Thanks for joining again. It'd be great to get some quick introductions. And you mentioned that you met in uni. I'd love to just kind of hear the preamble to Reducer, how you all met and got the idea going.
Do you wanna go first, Stu?
Yeah, so Joe and I met at university. I'm actually 3 years older than Joe, so he was in the first year when I was in my last year, and I was studying astrophysics. I think Joe was studying something equally important like philosophy, and I mean at the time we really bonded over darts, so that was our big thing, and it still is actually. So we have 12 people at Reducer, and we have 3 darts boards. So on average, we have 1 darts board per, 4 employees per darts board, I should say.
Yeah, it's the key metric that we track across the business.
And it's still my contention that Joe Gallard cost me my first at university. So I was on a first, I'd got sort of 80% on every course I'd ever done, and then I met Joe, got into darts, and I got a 2-1. So that's how we met, and stayed in touch ever since. And we've been running Reducer for 2.5 years now.
Yeah, that's exactly it, Stu. So I'm Joe. As Stu said, I'm the one with the less technical background. So I did politics, philosophy, and economics at university. So I went and became an accountant. So I trained and qualified with Deloitte in London in the sort of financial services industry. And then I went and joined a couple of startups after that. So one called Gusto, where I was sort of in there as about the 12th employee, went up to set up the finance function. That sort of grew astronomically in the time I was there. And it's now one of Europe's unicorns over the last couple of weeks that was announced, which is kind of exciting. And then I went and took up a finance director role at a company called Carwow. And again, I helped the company grow from sort of 30 to a couple of 100 people across a few countries in Europe. Carwow used Xero. So that was my sort of introduction to Xero and the sort of marketplace and the apps on there. And we had a big data book, so we tried using all the different apps for chasing it. And I think that's really where I started to realize that with Xero and this ecosystem of partners and apps, the sort of power you could have as a finance team to start giving insights and start doing things that you couldn't before. And I think the move to cloud accounting was a massive catalyst for the ability of accountants to add value to companies, either in-house or in practice. So saw the opportunity was there, and in the back of my mind, I've always, not since I was a small boy, but ever since I've grown up, I've had this pet peeve that buying stuff for businesses is so difficult, and getting good prices is so difficult. So what they don't tell you when you start working for a business is that everything's negotiable. Every price is hidden, so you don't get fair pricing, and you don't get any of the consumer protections you do as an individual. Or I'm not sure what it's like in the US, but in the UK you get plenty of protections, and I'm sure across Europe it's the same. So you end up getting screwed over. I think that's a word I can use on the Xero podcast. I could use a stronger word for what happens, and you end up overpaying massively on a load of stuff. And as a business finance manager or business owner, I think we looked across our businesses and we worked out they've probably got about 500 suppliers on average. So as you can imagine, managing that supplier base is very difficult. Business owners are busy. So we I've always wanted to come up with some way of solving that problem. And when we found out about Xero and found out about the sort of receipt scanning apps and the invoice scanning apps that were allowing that data to go onto the system, we thought, well, let's put 2 and 2 together. Instead of a finance team going, looking through those invoices, doing price benchmarking, finding better suppliers, doing all that sort of back and forth, we can just build a system that does that for them. So that's where the idea for Reducer came from. I think I was walking along the seaside one day and I just had this, let's put these 2 things together and we can solve this problem. And I sent, Stu will remember, I sent him a big WhatsApp message saying, can you do this? But is this possible? And I think he was like, yeah, I think so.
So for my own part, I graduated in astrophysics from the same university as Joe, so from Durham University obviously in the UK. And I quickly realized that there was no jobs in physics apart from being an academic, and it never really appealed to me a great deal. So I took a job with a consultancy called Detica, and they were quite an interesting company. They basically solved sort of deep data problems for the government. So they worked on problems like, how many nuclear weapons do you need to win a nuclear war? So I went and joined them, not really knowing what to expect. And that's where I learned how to develop for the most part.
I was going to say, how many nuclear weapons do you, I know this is sidetracking, but how many nuclear weapons do you need?
I'm not allowed to tell you, Joe.
It's your intern, that's your first job, find out. That's amazing.
So it was a cool company to work for, and in hindsight, I honestly didn't realize how techy it was, because I went from doing an astrophysics degree to working in a company where everyone was as nerdy as I was, and it was an environment that actually really worked for me. I enjoy really getting into the details of problems and working out what's under the hood.
Yeah, that's an amazing duo story. I'm equally as passionate about that, and it's really important with working with financial data that you've got strong systems involved. But that's a great connection story, and just the whole beginning piece. I actually came across a blog on your site about how you started it, and basically what I took away from it is that this business model is essentially like this modern day technical Robin Hood, where you're ensuring businesses aren't getting screwed or being taken advantage of by the recurring costs in business contracts. So I bet it's a really great mission to sort of get out of bed every morning and get other people involved, just cost saving for business, and the tools to do so are all, it's very interesting. The more I dug in, the more questions I had. So Joe, you'd mentioned like you were kind of walking along the pier, you kind of had this aha moment. I guess for both of you, like I like to ask this question because I think it exposes a lot. Like, what was your quit your job moment? Did you start this sort of on the side, or did you just say, I'm ready to do something new, let's both just jump in the deep end?
I think we did a bit of research first. So I think the one thing we did do is we went to one of the Xero developer events in London. That was, I think it was conveniently like a month or 2 later, and pitched the idea to one of the sort of partners. I don't know what the job title. We pitched it to someone there and said, look, is this something that Xero would be happy to work with? Because there's it's a new business model. It's not something that we knew anyone else was doing. They pointed us in the direction of a company in Australia who had done something similar, but not the same, which was kind of interesting, and they were working with, and kind of got the green light to sort of proceed with beginning to develop it. I think. I don't even know the answer. Stu, you probably know the answer to this better than me. We did some planning sessions, I think, before we decided to quit our jobs.
Yeah,
I don't think you quit your job without a planning session, to be honest.
Still written down. I've got to say, looking back on it, if there was a moment that Reducer really came into an existence, it was after Xero Developer Con in London in probably 2017. we met Dan and Nick and the guys there, and they were so enthusiastic about where this ecosystem could go, and they could see the potential of what people could do with accounting data. You know, there's a lot been written about open banking. There's a lot been written about the kind of data that people can now use out of banking systems in the UK. There's been a lot less talk about what people can do with data out of accounting systems. And certainly from our point of view, we think that the possibilities are quite likely greater than the possibilities out of open banking. So we came away from that developer conference really enthused, thinking, yes, this is what we want to do. This is a massive opportunity, and Xero are a company that can support us in getting there through the ecosystem they're going to build through their APIs.
Yeah, every business I've ever worked at, there's always this discussion of, oh, how do we work off the source of truth? And there's all these different databases and systems, but at the end of every day of every business I've ever been in, it's the accounting data. And so building systems on top of that can improve businesses is, yeah, the sky's the limit. That's a really interesting observation. And I'm really happy that the community sort of gave you the pep in your step to take this on, because yeah, like the more I dug in, the more questions I had, and it's just a really fascinating business. So with that, like I made an account, I started going through the process, and I was actually surprised at the industries that you kind of tie into. It was broadband, telecom, card payments, meaning like processing fees, electricity, gas, and water. Tell me about the first time you had to negotiate for a gallon of water price. Like, how did you even realize this was something you could do?
I think it's different by industry. So every industry is different. So like waste management, for example, the example there is like I go to a porta cabin somewhere in the middle of nowhere, talk to a guy who's quite happy doing what he's doing, and convince him that he needs to work with Reducer, and we can help him add more clients and work with this different business model. In some of the other areas that we work in, there's more established sort of routes that we could take to start getting prices and start working with suppliers. So for example, gas that you mentioned, there's an industry of brokers in the UK that already work with electricity suppliers. So when you go to them and say, look, I want to find customers for you, they're quite happy having that conversation, and they're quite happy sharing prices and entering an agreement with a company like us. But yeah, it's different, and it's interesting to see how each industry works and under the hood, so to speak, of each of them. Like the card payment one, so we do card payments that are taken in person. So where a shop will have a terminal you see on the counter. And the differences in prices you get people paying, the differences in service you get across different companies is absolutely crazy, and it's incredibly difficult to understand. I don't know how any business can comprehend something that has 50 different inputs into a calculation. We've obviously got a way of comparing it, but every business, every supplier uses different terms and charges in a slightly different way. So it's fascinating to see, and it's fascinating to see how those businesses often take their SME customers for granted and don't take care of them very well. So, we are about price, but we're also about quality of service and quality of suppliers, and suppliers have to have a certain level of service, otherwise we won't work with them. And I think a lot of large businesses take their SME customers for granted and make a lot more money out of them than they should. So we're hoping to give SMEs a bit more power and allow them to fight back a little bit against some of those larger suppliers they have. The other good thing we can do as well is help smaller suppliers grow and help good suppliers grow. So as a business to business supplier, it's very difficult to find new customers, because how do you know they're even buying the right service? If you're a gas supplier, how do you know which businesses are using gas, for example? With us, you can go find those businesses, give them prices, and get new businesses on board very, very easily.
I think from a novice learning about this industry very quickly, doing some research, like I kind of want to take a crack at how I think your product works, and then maybe we can like learn from there. Stuart, you can educate me on how the systems actually use the data, and then we can kind of get down into the weeds of like how you actually approach these businesses and store the prices. So my thought was, as I was going through it, like you must have some kind of like exhaustive list of keywords or something that you run in these bank line. You import data from an accounting package, bank statement line items, and you must be doing some kind of fuzzy matching on like the keywords or the names of the business or utility like gas, water, something that sort of indexes those keywords and says, hey, you probably have a gas supplier and a water supplier or a electricity supplier. And then you must be doing some kind of algorithmic matching around location, region, at price metric, and doing all sorts of crazy data analysis to match people with local vendors that prices are better.
Yeah, I mean,
is that anywhere close?
I mean, you're so close to how it works, and possibly you've gone a bit beyond where we are to where we would like to be. But I mean, first of all, like, almost thanks for recognizing how hard it is to identify the right kind of data in Xero, because for someone that's not kind of looked at this data before, there's certain clues as to what kind of data it might be. So people might be familiar with the fact that in Xero you have an account code, and that account code can relate to certain things like there's a default account code for lighting and heating and electricity and that kind of thing.
In the accounting world, it's called a general ledger code or trial balance code. Just for any accountants listening, that's
it's the short answer is it is very hard to work out what the right invoice line item to look at is. You're quite right that basically what we do is when someone connects Reducer to Xero, we look at all of the invoices, we look at their line items, and the first thing we try and identify is what kind of bill is this? Is it energy? Is it telecoms? Is it a card payment processing bill? And is it something that we're not currently interested in? And we have a bunch of different algorithms for looking at that. So some of it is based on the supplier name. So some of it is, okay, we know all of the suppliers in these different sectors. Do they match? And you're absolutely right that in order to do that, you have to do some clever matching in terms of the business name. So for example, if you've got a bill from British Gas, that's pretty easy. It's an energy bill. But what about BG or British G or any other variation you can think of? Another one you see a lot is BGDD dash a bunch of numbers. So like British Gas direct debit and then a bunch of numbers. Now we have we've done a lot of hard work in finding those invoices, and the product that we've come up with is pretty good. We have a success rate of sort of well over 99% in terms of the data in terms of positive matches. Interestingly, we generally err on the side of overmatching. So we're happy to match too much data, but what we definitely don't want to do is miss any data. So the rules that we put in place vary a little bit by sector. But once we have then identified the bills that we're interested in, the invoices, we then need to take the data off of the bills. And for that, we need attachments. So in order to, for example, produce an energy quote, not only do we need a line item saying that you spent £100 with British Gas, but we actually need that bill to say, okay, we can see the consumption, we can see your meter number, and we can see when your contract ends, and we can use that information to then actually provide a quote. So the next part is, having identified the right invoice, We're then going to see whether you've got an appropriate attachment, and we're going to use that attachment to quote on the service.
I even connected my demo company, and these are fake companies that have real type data, and I've got 6 different quotes, and I've got 7,400 pounds worth of annual savings potential. So it's amazing. It breaks down all the different industries we discussed, and yeah, it's really fascinating. I wasn't expecting the depth of the industries in which you pluck away. And on that note, like, Joe, how do you work with the technology team? Like, how do accountants and programmers sort of interface to decide what features are going to be developed or what your customers are asking for? Because you do sell primarily to accounting firms, not the actual small business owner, correct?
Yeah, so we mainly partner with accounting firms, and 99.9% of our clients come via accounting firms. So the way we work together is we both come up with ideas. We both sort of work out what's best to build in terms of the product. We get feedback from both my conversations with accountants and people in the business development team, conversations with accountants. In general, though, I think it's pretty easy to work out what we need to build, because we know exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to save SMEs money. We're trying to make it as easy as possible for them to see what their savings are and take those savings. So everything just falls out of that sort of mantra and that vision that we have for making things simple. So, what we've got coming up in terms of product development is very much stuff that makes it better for the SME or makes it better for the accountant working for the SME. So, and Stu puts in some sort of security stuff as well that sort of goes in. So I think we work in, I'm sure this is pretty normal for a tech company, but we have sort of cards where if I want anything done, I can add it to a card. It gets put on a backlog. Every sort of 3 months or so, we'll review the backlog, prioritize what we're building, as well as looking at some of the sort of longer term projects. And then, really short term ad hoc stuff. If something's broken, not that it ever breaks, but if something were to break, obviously that takes priority. So Stu very early in the day taught me how to use Confluence or Jira. I can't remember which one it is. One of those things to manage me and manage my sort of expectations on product development. And it means you can see what's been done, you can see the prioritization, you can see what hasn't been done and why, and you can sort of structure your product development in quite an organized way. So we rarely disagree over what needs to be built. We sometimes disagree slightly over prioritization, but not very often at all.
I think the source of, it's really important when you're building products like this to take as many sources as possible for your requirements or things you could build. So we have a sales team that's out talking to accountants and businesses every day, and they bring things in that they think those users might want. Obviously, it's also important for us to take some leadership and know the direction that we want to go in, that we think will build the best kind of product long term. So making sure that we take all of those sources of information, and it goes even wider than that. I always remember one of the best features we ever built was actually from an idea from a potential investor. And Joe had been to a pitch meeting and was talking about some of the pain points we had, and came back with this idea for one of our particular pain points, and it was absolutely the right decision, and we actually got it from an investor.
Yeah, and in terms of looking for product features or looking for ideas, Stu's an avid podcast listener. I'm an avid book reader on all of this sort of stuff. So I think Stu sent me a podcast about this Chinese company and how they created this viral effect with their with group buying, and I was like, we've got to find something like that. We've got to try something like that. So we're constantly looking at what other companies are doing, both in the sort of Xero ecosystem and outside the Xero ecosystem. So I probably signed up to most of the other larger apps in Xero to work out like, well, what's their flow for getting someone on board and then getting them to connect their data. Like, how do they get it to work? What can we take from different places to get it to work for us? Because a lot of the challenges that as a new person to the Xero marketplace you're facing, Receipt Bank dealt with sort of Receipt Bank auto entry. There are other data capture apps out there, all dealt with sort of 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. So some of it isn't reinventing the wheel in terms of the accountant relationship.
Yeah, I had a moment while I was exploring your product where I realized, I was like, wow, this is kind of like a group buying thing. Like this business model seems incredibly unique because it's enabled by cloud accounting, and it's using advanced algorithmic matching and high technology. But at the same time, there's got to be some historical nuances to this as well, like group buying, like back in the day, like guilds or like insurance kind of groups. Like, is there any historical significance that you found, like while you've been doing these outreaches to different like firms to negotiate on behalf of clients you may or may not have yet? Like, there's got to be something else there. It seemed it seemed like it definitely went deeper than the top level.
There's definitely something there, and businesses definitely a long time ago used to have bigger communities which enabled them to group together and buy together and get better offers and better services from their larger suppliers, and businesses have really lost that over the last sort of I don't know how long, but they've kind of lost their way and lost that sort of community and that ability to negotiate with larger suppliers. And I think business ownership has got far more complex. So, a business owner who runs a pizzeria, for example, might be really into like work out where they get their mozzarella from and getting the very best mozzarella from Italy. And they might be really into finding their sort of specialist dough and their pizza oven and spend loads of time working with those suppliers and getting the best pricing and getting the best service for them. And actually, they're spending a lot of stuff on non-value adding items like their electricity or the wood for the pizza oven or something. And they're buying far more of them than businesses did in the past. The number of purchases businesses make is huge. But unlike consumers, you don't have the Amazons you can go to for your business purchases. Like, you can't go to Amazon and find PR firm's a bad idea. You can't go to Amazon and find like an electricity company. You can't go to Amazon and just search for something. You end up searching in Google, and then a lot of the results Google services you are for consumers rather than for businesses. So to find the business side of it is really complicated. So I don't know how this is talking about historical perspectives on it, but I think what business owning has got harder and harder, and some sort of tool like Reducer should help business owners get some of that power back.
I think one thing I'd mention, Chris, and it's maybe not immediately obvious from like our website and what we currently do in our current product, but we're only scratching the surface of our ambition right now. So we currently quote across 8 different spend areas, and they're areas that people are very comfortable with in getting price comparison and getting offers with, because it's places if they were going to go and get this service, let's say energy or telecoms, they would probably go to a broker of some sort. So they'd probably go online. They'd probably go, rather than go to an individual supplier, they'd probably go to a broker who's going to search across the market and find them the best deal. And the reason that we're in those markets is because people are comfortable with those services being bought in that way. But we're currently quoting on probably 2% of what a company spends, and we see our kind of goal in the future is to help these businesses to reduce their spend across everything that they buy, not just these kind of 8 areas that we currently quote on. And another thing I'd mention is, I think, did someone mention in there like AWS spend? I'm not sure they did, but just a bit of a story is we had a company on very early on in our company sort of history, and they were spending millions of pounds on AWS. They were actually quite a young company, but we're obviously a very online centric organization, and we're always looking at new ways to help people. And not only do we sort of quote on those 8 areas where we can save people money, but we actually quote on areas, or at least provide hints on areas where we can't currently sort of make any revenue for ourselves. So one example will be AWS. Whenever we see a company that it has big spend on AWS, we go and have a quick look to see whether they are using instant pricing or reserve pricing. And this is getting a little bit techie, but it's probably quite good for this podcast. Instant pricing is on-demand sort of server pricing, and it's the most expensive way of doing it. If you know that you've got a high spend, you can tell your cloud provider ahead of time, hey, we're spending £1 million a year, and I'm certain we're going to spend, let's say, at least £600,000. How about I guarantee that I'll spend that amount of money with you? It might only be half of the amount you expect to spend, and by doing so, we'll get a discount on that amount. So we actually provide that feedback to customers as well. If we see that there's areas that they can save money where effectively we've got no kind of commercial relationship ourselves, we provide advice. And another great one that we really love doing is MailChimp. So a lot of companies use MailChimp to send out newsletters. And not many companies know that if you enable 2-factor authentication on your MailChimp account, you get 10% off everything you spend with them. So
yeah, I think they got rid of that a couple of months ago, unfortunately. But it was on every bill. Every MailChimp bill had it at the bottom if you hadn't done it. So they were obviously having a push for 2-factor authentication. I think they might have got rid of it now, unfortunately.
Good carrot and a stick to increase security in your platforms. Like, hey, here's some money. Do you want it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So that's very interesting. I think the last sort of unturned stone piece for me is that how do you make money? Are you getting flat fees from accounting firms? Are you getting partial savings on new contracts signed?
So at the moment, we work in the same way a price comparison website does. So we get paid by suppliers. So all of the suppliers will pay us a small fee if and when the underlying business saves them money. And I think it's kind of important for me to be to have that value linked with where we extract money. So we could charge accountants, we could charge clients, but actually we only make money if someone takes a saving. So we are incentivized to find people savings and help them make them, as opposed to incentivized to sign people up and then just leave them, which is another business model we could have taken, or charge accountants a sort of monthly fee for using the platform. Again, when we set the business up, we were very clear that we wanted to align ourselves with the interests of both the accountant and the business, and align ourselves with businesses saving money, because the way to build a business that is big and successful is by aligning those interests. So we are 100% focused on doing what works for the SME and what works for the accountant. So that's how we make money.
I think that just sort of clicked for me. I was wondering if you were like going out to approach these businesses, but then you've created a system where you're onboarding new suppliers and they're coming to you because they realize you have this big pool of people who are looking to improve their standing within their financial recurring costs. So that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, and from the supplier perspective, it obviously makes sense as well, because suppliers have, a lot of business suppliers in the UK at least, have large telesales teams who will be calling businesses day in, day out, trying to convince them, or doing door-to-door, trying to convince them to sign up with them. Now you're calling a business, what's the chance that they've got the service that you're trying to sell them? What's the chance that they can switch because they're not in contract with another provider? What's the chance that they want to go with you as a supplier as opposed to check against 4 or 5? You know, the economics of doing that for a supplier is very, very expensive. So working with someone like us, you can both save the business money by giving them cheaper prices and pay us a little bit of money as well. It just works for everyone, I think.
Nice. Yeah, it's really a brilliant idea, and I yeah, happy that we were able to dig in and uncover some of these things. So Stuart, I have a couple of questions for you because I'm happy you were able to join this call. I would love to learn sort of from, click to close of like what's your technology stack, like what web frameworks are you using, and just sort of take me through like the technology stack trace more or less of like when a customer comes to your site, like how does the data get pulled and then used and saved?
Sure. So I guess the place to start is at the client, right? So our client-side technology is Vue.js. Not everyone might know it. So the two big JavaScript frameworks out there are React and Angular, and Vue.js is kind of like it's almost like the third option. But I've got to say it's a technology that we've loved using and it's been really good for us. At the back end, we use Java. We also use the Xero Java SDK, which is really good. And big up to Sid for developing that for us. And then behind that, we use AWS. So we make really heavy use of AWS services. So almost everything that isn't in our clients or in our kind of monolithic Java backend is on AWS. So just to mention a few services that we use there. So we use DynamoDB for our data store. So that's a NoSQL database. It's really good for scale. So that's the main reason people go for that. So regardless of how much data that you put into that database, if you get data by its key, it doesn't matter whether you're getting, whether your database has got 100 clients or 1 million, you're going to get that data back in the same kind of time. So DynamoDB is a really good service that we use there, and something that is actually it's come on leaps and bounds in just the kind of 3 years that we've been using it. So they've added tons of really cool features like point-in-time recovery, encryption by default. All of that stuff is coming in the kind of 3 years that we've been using it.
Yeah, it's a very solid stack. Great call outs. Yeah, just really well thought out, and it's a challenging business as well because you're sort of at the mercy, so to speak, of these external providers for the data. So maybe, I mean, Joe, you probably have some insights in this as well from the accounting side, but what have you learned that other developers might want to take into consideration about building a product which basically starts with an external data source? You've got to handle API limits, authentication, all sorts of different things can sort of, to build around like that entry point. What are some like lessons that you've learned about working with Xero's API in particular, or other accounting packages?
I don't think I've got much to say on this. I think this comes back to you, Stu, to be honest. I think, from our perspective, working with Xero was the easiest integration we did. I mean, I'm just saying this. Stu knows the full answer, so I'll just hand over.
Something that I think is worth mentioning here is we've been developing Reducer for 3 years. The integration with Xero, you could quibble over it, but took around 2 to 3 weeks. And I think that's a testament to sort of both how easy Xero have made it to integrate, but also just the general community that have made that easier, right? So when I was building web systems 10 years ago, no one used OAuth. That wasn't a thing. You used username and password, and you used bespoke ways of authenticating systems. And now we've got these incredible tools that we share for connecting systems, and it's no surprise that there's been an absolute explosion in use of ecosystems and use of APIs. Everything has become more connected, and everything has become so much easier to connect. And I think the biggest compliment I could give to that is how easy it is and how little effort it is. It doesn't require a great deal of thought. The documentation's pretty good. And like, if you're a developer these days who's not like up to date with using OAuth 2 and REST API calls?
Yep. Yeah, me, obviously. It would have taken me a lot more than 2 weeks. Yeah.
That's always great to hear, though. Yeah, I think as a community and a developer platform, like, we're continually improving. So these types of conversations are always really helpful and grateful to have them. Yeah, just some of that honest feedback is always great, because we're certainly a work in progress just as much as any other businesses. Have there been any challenges in mapping data between QuickBooks and Xero? And I think those are the two that you integrate with now. I guess, are there any challenges in mapping that data between two different data models? And also, like, do you have plans to expand to additional cloud accounting packages? I saw in some of your interview notes that you're really just focusing on the cloud accounting because that's really enabling this business to scale. But yeah, I'd be curious to hear both your thoughts on that.
I can possibly tell you a slightly embarrassing stroke amusing story about our early days. The very first MVP of Reducer, and Joe will remember this well. One thing we didn't mention was I actually moved in with Joe and his wife when we started the company. It was that real kind of.
She is also from Durham Uni as well, so it wasn't that weird.
You know each other well. But we were sat around the kitchen table, and we had a real sort of, oh God, what have we built moment? Because I built the system such that when someone connected and gave us access to their data, we actually mingled all of the data. We basically only had two objects, if you like, the user and their invoices. So if a user connected more than one organization, or more than one organization in Xero, we just added all of that data into their user accounts and tried to quote on that. And I was like, oh God, like, what have I done? I mean, it was very early days.
It's been a tough year for the international business community and just everybody on earth, so to speak. I saw in one article that you had said it's really important for your team to be physical in the office. You obviously, that was like when I think you were a team of 4. And I've flip-flopped both ways, because I've been remote 100% jobs and I've been in small teams, and there's pros and cons with both of them. But obviously stuff has changed. And while it's probably not quite time for reflection on all of it, I thought it'd be great to hear from a business leader in this space. Like, what have you learned either about yourself or just humans in general throughout this year of trying to build a company in the cloud accounting space?
I think small businesses especially have had a really tough time, as have accountants trying to work with them. And I think the passion that a lot of accountants have had for helping those small business clients and helping them survive and prosper through what is undoubtedly probably one of the most challenging trading conditions ever has been really heartwarming to see. And you can see, the passion people have for helping businesses. And ultimately, that's what Xero are doing. That's what Reducer are doing. That's what accountants are doing. We're helping businesses survive and thrive. And there's a real personal element to that as well, because it's not about the business. It's about, the people's family that are fed from the business, and the other, people they employ, and the communities that those businesses are part of. So it's been really, really exciting to see the way that service providers, such a boring phrase, people like ourselves, Xero, other people in the ecosystem have really stepped up to help small businesses, and the number of different ways that they've been able to do that. Yeah, and I think it's interesting is the there's never a right the best time to do cost saving. The best time to do cost saving is like 2 years ago, but the second best time is now. But I think one that really hit home was actually one of our first customers that we took on, right at the beginning, about a year and a half ago. And I got an email from them recently, and they were like, you know what, Joe, we saved them about £40,000, which is a big number for us, but not unheard of. And we got an email from them a couple of months ago that I shared with the team that basically said, look, we had a look at our bank account. We had to shut down. The amount in our bank account was exactly the amount you'd saved us. So I thought I'd send you an email and say thank you, because without you guys, we'd be on Xero, and then we wouldn't know how to pay our staff. So it's stories like that make you want to go on and do more for businesses, really. And we are finding some crazy savings.
So for both of you, sort of like bring this to a close, like what's like sort of the 10,000-foot view vision, assuming the world gets back to its normal pace, and also like what is anything you'd like to say to the Xero community?
Hi, Xero community.
Welcome.
I guess 10,000 foot. So, standing back and looking at it, I think there's a huge opportunity for us to help small businesses. We are just getting started in what we want to do in our ambitions there, and Xero is a real central part of that. And our business wouldn't be possible without cloud accounting systems and cloud accounting data. So partnership with Xero is really important for us. And yeah, that's it.
I think some of the theme, which is like the Xero community is all about supporting businesses. We're all in it for the same reasons. We all want to see those businesses thrive, and it's not a zero-sum game. So let's get together, let's communicate, let's work together, and let's help get those businesses back on their feet this year, or next year, I should say.
Well, yeah, I'm super grateful for both of you guys joining. You have a friend and a resource in the business that sounds like you already had already, but just love to see success in the ecosystem, and such a brilliant business and such brilliant founders, and surely a great team behind you. So thanks again for joining today. And yeah, that's a wrap.
No problem. Thanks, Chris.
Enjoyed it. Cheers, mate.